Everyone. Hi. How y'all doing? Good? Yeah. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. We're so excited to be here with all of you. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director here at Books Are Magic. So, tonight is our third iteration of Booksellers Read. Very exciting. For those of you who don't know, these events are opportunities for the many writers on our staff to take a break from talking about everyone else's books and turn the spotlight on their own. Tonight, you'll hear short stories, essays, poetry, excerpts from novels at every stage of the process first draft, 10th draft, and beyond. We have 5 readers tonight, as you'll see on the little programs on your seats. I'm going to introduce all the readers in the order in which they'll be reading, and then we're going to dive right in. So, first will be me. My name is Amali Garden Buxbaum. I'm a writer from Albuquerque, New Mexico, currently living in Brooklyn. As of right now, my work can be found in Bodega Magazine. Clap for me. Thank you. Then we'll hear from Sarah Jane Abbott, who sells, ghostwrites, and edits books for kids. She lives in Brooklyn with her impish cat, Loki. Our third reader for the night will be Michaela Bryant. Michaela is an archivist, film photographer, and writer, born and raised in rural North Carolina. She currently lives in Brooklyn and is currently working on her first novel. After Michaela will be Bex Frankberger, who is a writer whose work has been featured here and there, but most recently in Dizzy and Mizna. Bex is also the author of Rot Party, which is available for purchase tonight at the register at the front. They live in Brooklyn. And to wrap things up, our final reader will be Alexa Brahmi. Alexa is a writer from Southern California living in Brooklyn. Her debut novel, Good News, is forthcoming from Algonquin Books in 2026. That's next year. So we're so excited to have all of our readers and listeners and booksellers and friends here with us tonight. To kick things off, I am going to be reading a very short little thing that, so for some context, I have gotten into a habit at these things of reading from my very long-running big memoir-ish project about the year that I lived in Hanoi when I was 12. And that was originally the plan for tonight. But then this past weekend, my boyfriend and I were hanging out by a lake in Massachusetts, and these 2 women in their 70s plop their chairs down just a few feet from where we're lying. And one of them just starts monologuing about her ex-husbands and their wild lives together. And so we had no choice to just be absolutely quiet and eavesdrop as much as possible. And so this is a semi-fictionalized account of this woman and her 3 husbands. All right. First, there was Lori. Lori enjoyed rock climbing, trail running, and sweaty morning sex, the corners of his mouth still crusted with dried up drool. They met on a guided tour of Ghost Ranch. She was there to see the land that inspired Georgia O'Keeffe for much of her life. He was there to break the record time for climbing Chimney Rock. For a moment, they stood together, looking up at the vast, uninterrupted blue sky, each feeling very small and insignificant, and finding comfort in one another's companionship. He proposed on Camelback, the great pyramids of Giza towering behind them. She said yes. Her camel snorted and licked its nostril. They got married on top of Table Mountain, the wind so violent it whipped her veil straight off her head. They kissed as it pirouetted and thrashed through the air, a giant eel of tulle and lace, until a jagged rebar slashed its way through its fragile body. Life with Lori was always an adventure, a camping trip in Joshua Tree, to a cruise around the Galapagos Islands, to a motorcycle tour of northern Vietnam. She barely had time to recover from jet lag before jetting off again. His friends were all athletes and craftsmen and IPA enjoyers, And after a while, she resented having to give up her nights at the theater for drinks after the climbing gym. By 11 p.m., she would always end up by herself in the corner booth, nursing a gin and tonic and ripping a napkin into shreds, while Laurie shared stories of his latest Serengeti safari to a circle of enwrapped drinking buddies. She loved their adventures, but was certain that one day soon she'd need to settle down, either that or die in a plane crash. It was at one of these unengaging evenings at the brewery where she met Richard. Richard, she says to her friend, was very European. He ordered red wine and, before taking a sip, would bring the glass up to his nose and inhale as deeply as possible. He knew everything about cheese pairings, which was a delight to his girlfriend and his girlfriend's other boyfriend on the rare occasion that they were all together for a dinner party. Richard and his girlfriend met at a weekly pottery class, where Richard was working tirelessly at throwing the perfect carafe as a housewarming gift for Laurie and for her. She fell in love with Richard while she was still Laurie's wife, and while Richard was still his girlfriend's other boyfriend. All she could do was wait. Hike with Laurie, wait for Richard. Cook for Laurie, wait for Richard. Go down on Laurie, wait for Richard. It was agonizing. And then one day, Richard's girlfriend dumped both boyfriends and left the city with her pottery instructor. Richard was shattered and confused, left alone in shambles. So what choice did she have but to comfort him? To bring him Tupperware full of casseroles and lasagna and bottles of red wine that were just $10 more expensive than her usual choice. Finally, one evening, after finishing a full-bodied Cabernet Sauvignon and nibbling away at bites of sharp cheddar, she kissed Richard. She and Laurie were divorced by the end of the month, and she and Richard wed 1 month later at a California vineyard where the air was thick with fruit and dirt. She re-wore her old wedding dress and skipped the veil. They honeymooned in Nice, and she felt utterly at peace, grounded and cared for after years of planes and mopeds and schooners. Richard was a retired history professor who clung onto his academic fame by publishing arduous papers on the feudal system of Mesopotamia and the many wives of King Solomon. If he wasn't hunched over a desk in his office, then he was hunched over a pot of coq au vin simmering on the stove, or his precious basil plant in the backyard, whose leaves were turning yellow and brown. After some time, a lull began to creep through their relationship. Things were getting stale. Routine was hard to shake, and soon enough it was breakfast and coffee at 8 a.m., a 6-hour blur of errands and shopping and whatever nonsense she could distract herself with while Richard typed away. Dinner and a bottle of Merlot, reading in bed, maybe a hand job if she was feeling generous, lights out by 10, and repeat. He suggested adding an additional something to the mix, or someone. Baby? Of course not. Second girlfriend. She tried to consider it, to imagine a life of sharing Richard, her love, her rock, with someone else, but she just couldn't do it. Too European. In the end, all roads lead to James. James, who is standing at the edge of the lake, both hands on his hips, well-worn Keens on his feet with socks pulled all the way up to his knees. James, who has brought 2 bottles of sunscreen, a cooler full of seltzers, and a dog-eared copy of Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible, per her recommendation. James, who packed the sandwiches, selected the CDs, but didn't argue when she wanted to drive. James, who has heard her stories of Laurie and Richard just about 200 times and doesn't mind at all. Thank you. All right, Sarah Jane, come to the stand.
I think so. Hi, thanks Amali. Thanks everyone for coming. I've been querying my adult novel, so if anybody knows anyone who wants historical fantasy, let me know. But for now, I've been working on a children's chapter book. So for like 7-8-year-olds, it's called Snake and Vole and the Great Greenhouse, and this is how it starts. Chapter 1, The Smell of Disaster. It was a gray August morning that seemed perfectly unremarkable. The great greenhouse stood quiet and empty, as it always was. The squirrel brothers were chasing one another up and down the trees. The hummingbirds were buzzing around the trumpet creepers. No one would have guessed it was a day that would change everything. No one, that is, except for Snake. Snake always thought something was amiss. He was on his usual rounds of the woods and undergrowth surrounding the great greenhouse, checking for disaster. He flicked the air with his tongue. Yes, he thought, there it is, the smell of disaster. He was not sure what the disaster was, or where it was, but it was most certainly there. He slithered through the damp leaves underneath the rotting garden shed, as he did every morning. He was so busy wondering what the day would bring, he nearly collided with the nest. It was a shallow bowl of leaves and moss, and inside were three strange things, long white cylinders with rounded ends. Snake had never seen anything like them. He had seen blue speckled robin's eggs. He had seen teeny tiny hummingbird eggs. He had even seen a woven silk sack of spider's eggs. But these were unlike any of those, and they were all alone, no father or mother in sight. These mysterious lonely eggs made his stomach do cartwheels. Snake needed answers immediately. Snake needed Vole. Vole was settling in for her usual breakfast of nuts, berries, and a good stiff cup of root tea when she heard a far-off, frantic slithering through grasses. Vole had quite a keen sense of hearing and always knew when Snake was coming. She set another teacup on the table and poured him a steaming cup. Vole, said Snake, breathless, I found something. A nest of somethings. You must come right away. Good morning, Snake, Vole said, blowing on her tea. Have some tea and tell me about your nest of somethings. She pulled out a second chair and took a long, deep breath. After a moment, Snake did too. He slithered up onto the chair. He leaned down and slurped from the teacup. Vole took her seat across from him and popped a nut into her mouth. It's under the garden shed. It is made of rotting leaves and it has strange little eggs in it. They are all alone. No one is taking care of them. Perhaps their parents just went out for a moment and are coming back, Snake. I don't think so, Snake said. They seemed quite lonely. I think we need to check. Vole sighed. Very well, we will check. She took a last sip of her tea and they were off. Be careful, said Snake. He was hovering over Vole as she examined the three little eggs. I am being careful, Snake, Vole said. She sniffed at the nest, ran her hands over the eggs, and put her ears up to them to listen. Vole could not see much with her eyes, but she saw more than enough with her hands and her ears. I know what these are. You do? Oh, I knew you would. What are they, Vole, and where is their mother? They are snake eggs. That is what you looked like when you were very small. Snake squinted at the eggs. I am not so sure you are right. I am quite certain, Snake. I've seen many nests of eggs like this in my time. They will be lovely bright green snakes like you. Snake smiled bashfully. And it is normal for them to be alone. Their mother laid them here, and in a few days they will hatch and make their own way in the world. That is how it is with snakes. But that's terrible. They need someone to look after them. Snake slithered into the nest and wrapped himself around the eggs. Nonsense, said Vole reasonably. You did not have someone to look after you when you hatched. Exactly, Snake cried. And look how I turned out. Vole looked at Snake. Snake looked at Vole. Very well, said Vole. I will get the snacks. Snacks? If we are going to stay with these eggs until they hatch, we are going to need some snacks. Snake smiled a smile that lit up his whole face. It was so happy and warm, Vole could feel it, like a hug. Chapter 2, The Rumble Beast. Snake and Vole had been sitting with the eggs all morning, talking of this and that, eating snacks, and listening to the cicadas sing to one another in the trees. The red-eyed insects had come out of the ground after waiting for 17 long years, and the wood around the great greenhouse was alive with their symphony. Do you think the eggs are warm enough, Vole? Snake asked, from where he was wrapped around them in the nest. Snake eggs do not need to be warm, Vole said. They do not usually have a nice friend to sit on them. And I don't think you are very warm anyways. Are you sure you don't want to go out into the sunlight? It was true. Snake was a wee bit chilly. On afternoons like this one, he liked to warm himself by basking on his favorite rock, a nice, flat, smooth one right in front of the great greenhouse, in the bright rays of sunshine. There were no rays of sunshine under the shed, bright or otherwise. I am fine, Vole. May I have a caterpillar? Snake said. Just as Vole passed over the treat and he ate it out of her hand, there was a terrible rumbling sound. Snake was so startled he almost choked on the caterpillar. Vole! Vole, did you hear that? He shouted. Yes, I heard it. And I also heard you. Very, very much. I'm sorry, Vole, Snake said, much softer. I know you don't like when noises are so very loud. But what was that noise? There it is again. Vole put her ear to the ground and listened, listened. Snake held his breath and tried to be patient. It was hard. It is a rumble beast, Vole declared. A rumble beast, Snake wailed. What's a rumble beast? It is a creature that is a metal box with round legs that carries humans from place to place. I can hear them where they roam, on the faraway plains beyond the great greenhouse. They honk like geese to communicate. But why would a rumble beast be coming here now? Snake clutched the eggs, slithering deeper down into the nest of rotting leaves and twigs. I do not know, Vole said, munching on an acorn. How can you snack at a time like this, Vole? Snake said. Well, we cannot stop a rumble beast, Vole said reasonably, so there isn't any use in worrying about it until we know there is a real reason to worry. There is always some reason to worry, Vole, Snake said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. Have a dried cricket, Snake, Vole said, handing him another treat. Snake took a small, half-hearted bite. The rumbling got louder and louder. Snake was beside himself with worry. Eventually, he slithered over to Vole and wrapped himself around her in a tight hug. Vole put her arms around his neck and patted him. There, Snake. It's all right. The rumble beast can't get us under here. But we have to come out eventually, Snake pointed out. We don't even know if it is coming this way, Vole said. The rumble beast was, in fact, coming that way. In a moment or two, there was a crunch, 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 and the beast's round legs rolled up the gravel trail that led to the great greenhouse. Snake gathered his courage and slithered to the edge of the shed to have a look. The beast was a shiny blue color with 2 yellow eyes that lit up in the hazy afternoon. It stopped right in front of the shed facing the great greenhouse. It was as if it was looking right at them. It can see us, Vole, Snake exclaimed. I don't think it can, Snake, Vole said. It is too dark under here. After a moment, the rumbling ceased and the eyes stopped glowing. The beast must be sleeping. But then the beast opened its mouth, which was on its side, and out came a human. She was a short, round, older woman with soft-looking, crinkly skin, silver hair, and a smile on her face. To Snake's shock and horror, the rumble beast opened another mouth on the other side of its body and released a second human it must have swallowed. Out popped a child human, very small, with 2 little tails of dark brown hair and eyes that were lit up with joy and excitement. She was jumping up and down. Grammy, is this it? Is this our new home? The child squeaked. And the forest is ours too? Is all of this our yard? It is, Pumpkin, all ours. The small silver-haired woman grinned. Let's go inside and pick out your room. How about that? Yeah, the child shouted, running towards the great greenhouse. The one called Grammy reached into the rumble beast and pulled out 2 small containers, one in each hand. As she followed the child to the house, Vole sniffed the air, and Snake heard a hissing and then a yowl come from one of the containers. Cats, they both said at once. Snake shivered.
Can y'all hear me? Okay. Wait, give me 1 second. Okay. Hi. I'm so serious. I'm Michaela. I'm currently in the process of writing a book right now called Maverick. Yeah. It's a literary fiction about a Black woman who's a photographer, taken under the wing of this interdisciplinary artist named Tony Albert. And they develop this weird kind of relationship. But the scene that I'm reading right now is her being in the city. He flew her out to Rome, Italy, and she's kind of just wandering the streets right now. So, yeah, here we go. I spent hours walking around the city, pivoting the side streets, walking deliberately on the cobblestone, scribing and sketching in my notebook. I fantasized about studying abroad in Europe, especially in Rome, for years, propelled by the architecture and rich history I used to read about in art and textbooks throughout my academic career. I decided to make my way to a cocktail bar that was recommended to me by a curator at the Maxi, and I was greeted by the exquisite frescoed ceilings. The grandeur space was filled with couples at tables with dim lit candles and patrons side by side at the long marble bar. I made my way to the only vacant seat on the edge and asked for a glass of red wine, quickly entranced by the beauty of the bartender. She had glowy olive skin, long black hair, patchwork tattoos, and a silver eyebrow piercing. She was wearing a dark gray corset top and a black short skirt. Red wine for you on me, she smiles, putting down the glass. Thank you, I said, never leaving her gaze. I reached for the wine and felt her grab the top of my hand. Her hands were covered in tattoos, her fingers filled with silver intricate rings. I'm Nina. I aerate the red and take a sip. I'm Maverick. I've never seen you around here. I live in New York City. How cool, she says, flinging a towel over her shoulder. I've always wanted to visit. It's a great place. Are you from Rome? Paris, actually. I'm here for school. She leans over the counter and puts her chin in the palm of her hand. I look down at her lips, pouty and lush. You like it? I'm ready to be back in Paris, maybe New York even, she adds. Why don't you leave? Maybe I just need the sign to go. Well, here's your sign, I say flirtatiously, picking up my glass of wine, making my way over to the lounge attached to the bar. The space had large pastel couches and art books spread across the wooden L-shaped coffee table. I spent time going through them. Vogue, Apartamento, Frieze. I will look up every so often at Nina moving swiftly from patron to patron. After a while, Nina struts up to me and rests her hand on my shoulder. My shift is over. Want to smoke? Sure, I say. I chug the rest of my wine, grab her hand, and follow her out of the bar into the patio. We stood under the awning, watching the gray clouds and sporadic showers move. My friend Marcel is DJing nearby, and some people are at the club waiting for me. Would you want to come? Nina asked me, offering me her cigarette. I was hesitant. I haven't smoked cigarettes since undergrad, but took a hit and felt the burning sensation of tobacco hit my throat. I took another. I'm down. Where is it? Not too far. Don't worry, I don't bite. She smiles and holds my hand again. Once the rain finally stopped, we made our way over to the club. Nina told me about her time in Rome. She is in her final year of grad school studying art history and literature. Her thesis is on Italian women writers and their prominence during the 19th and 20th century. I tell her about graduating from Pratt, getting an MFA in photography and curatorial studies, how I'm a freelance film photographer and assistant to Tony. I showed her a picture of his face and his art for reference. He's talented and cute. Rare, Nina laughs. I smile, squeezing her hand. Even though I knew Nina for such a short amount of time, talking to her felt like home. We arrived at the club and two guys were standing at the entrance smiling at us. Nina skips up to them and drowns in their arms, both kissing each side of her head. Maverick, these are my friends, Angela and Richie. Angela and Richie, this is Maverick. We met earlier this evening. Angela and Richie come up to me individually and embrace me, both planting two kisses each on my cheeks. So nice to meet you, Richie says. Richie has bleached eyebrows, curly hair, wearing a baseball cap, black shorts, and a black tank. Angela wearing a Dickies jumpsuit with a bleach buzz cut and stretched septum piercing. The four of us talked outside the club, watching the ebb and flow of people enter and exit. After a while, Angela and Richie decide to make their way in. Coming with, Angela asks, pointing his thumb towards the entrance. We'll meet you inside, Nina says. She reaches in her skirt pocket and pulls out a small baggie with pills inside and takes out two. One for you and one for me, she says, handing me a pill. What's this? I say, holding up the pill, inspecting it. A happy pill, she smiles, cheers. She clinks the pill against mine like they're glasses and takes it. I follow suit. We made our way into the club. It was in a large warehouse. People were pushed together like sardines, dancing, drinking, doing drugs, making out with each other. The lights flickered between primary colors every few seconds, and the DJ was playing intoxicating house music. Marcel is on, Nina yelled in my ear. We made our way to the front and began dancing. I was in a daze, focusing on Marcel move effortlessly between two decks and started to feel quite envious, captivated by the way he moved the crowd. People danced and cheered every other song. Behind him, a revolving door of people entering and exiting onto the stage to stay on the platform behind him. We spot Angelo and Richie mingling with a group of people on stage, but Nina and I decided to stay on the dance floor. After each song, we got closer and closer. Eventually, I kissed her. After a while of dancing and making out, she whispers in my ear seductively, "Let's get out of here." We end up calling a car, disinclined to walk back so late. We sat close, kissing and caressing each other ardently in the small sedan. We took the squeaky elevator up to the third floor and quietly made our way to my room. Right before entering, we look up and notice Tony digging in his pocket, looking for his key to his room. He looks up, noticing Nina and I. "You must be Tony," Nina smiles, walking up to him and shaking his hand. "Feel free to join us in Maverick's room for a nightcap if you'd like." "Please," I follow up a bit too loudly. I open the door to my room. Nina and I sit closely on the bed and Tony in the desk chair. We gather up 3 glasses and fill them with liquor, making small talk about our evenings. After a while, Nina looks at Tony and pats a spot next to her. "Come here," she directs. Tony rises and sits next to her. They look each other in the eyes, both smiling, and they leaned in once to kiss each other. I watch turned on. Nina then turns to me. I reach for her and she kisses and grabs my leg. She pulls back and gets on her feet. "You two, get close," Nina says to us. Tony and I close the distance between us. He looks over at me and grabs my face and comes close to it. "Is this okay?" he asks. "Yes," I directed. Then we kissed hard. We were two people who had been itching for each other's touch for months. We kissed for a long time. He held up my arms, took off my top, and made his way down my body, kissing my neck, my chest, my breasts, his mouth on one while kneading the other. I pulled him to stand and took off his top, his pants, his underwear until he's completely naked. He was absolutely beautiful. Nina then turns Tony's face towards her. They kiss, and he strips her naked. I stand, marveling at these two beautiful individuals entwining with each other. The two then come towards me and began embracing different parts of my body and stripping me naked. I kissed Nina, then Tony, then the both of them, and we spent the rest of the night making love until the sun rose, until the birds sang outside my window. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bex. I have a chapbook for sale at the front that I've already made most of you purchase. But I won't be reading from that tonight. I had the immense privilege a few weeks ago to attend a residency with a lot of really wonderful writers who talked about how rare it is to be somewhere and not feel like you're the only one losing your mind. And it was really surreal to have that happen and then be read love poems. And so I wanted to read one of them to you. And this is from Lina Khalaf Tufaha. She's a Palestinian poet. This is from her latest collection, Something About Living. Won the National Book Award. It's called Dendrology, which is the natural history of trees. We are 5 in the van, 3 of us Southerners, or maybe 2. One has migrated west. Americans now. Our shoes and our proclivities indicate practitioners of liminal freedoms. We can identify and describe what will undo us. We upend our stories with bilingual euphemisms. One recalls the curses of a father. Another reenacts his child's slippage between words, mother tongue, and moment. What kind of trees are these, I ask, noting the lacy canopies that shade the sidewalks. It is engineered to look accessible, the American city, the distance from one to another in this country. We know our names are gray zone enough to invite exercises of classification. They may or may not be oak, though one of us doubts, lists the qualities of bark, of leaves. Likely pecans, a Southerner suggests, recalls a childhood neighbor's front yard tree. Years ago, my mother confided, as we drove north past a pleat of snow-capped cedars, some mornings I imagine it all returned, asphalt pulled up with our structures and transgressions undone. We are always learning the original names of trees. So the second thing I'm going to read from you is from a novella I'm working on called The Book of Gobran. It's about a person who was raised thinking they're Greek and being Greek Orthodox. It turns out they're Egyptian, which is definitely not what happened to me. And they find out after they turn 16 and soon after their grandfather passes, and that's when they find out the truth because he has a Coptic funeral And so this is them kind of looking back at that year and finding out and the aftermath. Sorry, we're all such different heights. Okay. Sorry. For as long as I can remember, I have wanted to be a translator, and since at 16 I had not yet learned to value entropy, I placed high expectations on the next 15 years of my life. My 20s categorized by degrees, accolades, and trilingualism. Reddit was still new, not yet the troll kingdom would soon become, and it was there I first discovered summer break immersion programs geared towards English-speaking high schoolers. The programs were expensive and scholarships rare, but in the slideshow I made to convince my parents to let me, I'm so sorry. Also, they were asked to keep it a secret that they're Egyptian. I practiced this. They don't have to say they're Greek, but keep Egypt on the down low. Sorry. Anyway, programs were expensive and scholarships rare, but in the slideshow I made to convince my parents to let me apply, I offered to pay for both the applications and program myself. My parents agreed easier than I anticipated, perhaps because they figured I would never save enough money for the trip. There were few jobs for high schoolers in my suburb other than summer lifeguarding, and the only person I knew who had some semblance of work was my crush, a girl 2 grades above me who made money giving stick and pokes behind the bleachers at soccer games. My only tattoo, a poorly drawn juice box in honor of the Strokes, was, in my crush's words, her best work, and it paid for the compass charm on her Juicy Couture bracelet. My own employ was less scandalous. I tutored. I spent the fall before my grandfather's passing instructing my friends' younger siblings, and then their friends, and their friends, to the point that I was able to apply to 2 immersion programs, either of which would whisk me to Europe for the first half of summer break. Their schedules overlapped, meaning I could only attend one, but I applied to both in the hope this would boost my scholarship odds. One program would take me to Berlin to study German, the other to Athens to study Greek. The idea, for better or for worse, had always been to study German and Greek. German, not because of my Austrian heritage on my father's side, but because I thought it was funny, and Greek because of my heritage, soon my not heritage. There were other reasons, more respectable ones, but these were the 2 I protected and held close. My parents proofread my applications, reading about my love for Sebald in one and Antigone in the other, about my adoration of German's gender neutrality and my pride for Greek's ancient ubiquitous roots. By the time I learned of my Coptic lineage, it was too late to rescind my applications without forfeiting the fees I'd paid with my dull but hard-earned money. A part of me hoped I'd be accepted into both programs without receiving any aid. That way I could feel good about getting in, but not conflicted about not going, and I could spend all summer moping, reevaluating the rest of my long, banal life. But the decision was soon out of my hands. I received a manic email 3 weeks after my grandfather's funeral informing me the Athens program had closed operations. Application fees would not be refunded. I felt relieved, or perhaps fated in that way things feel when you're young, that I would not be going to Greece. It was better than if I'd gone in without funding. Forces beyond my control, capitalism, the Olympics, had made the decision for me, at least for that summer. I could tuck away the pain I felt for losing this language, this mythical history, these connections I felt were real simply because I thought they were. Now none of it was authentic. None of it was interesting. An ego death of drowning in bathwater. I was accepted into the German language program on a full scholarship. I left most of my tutoring money in my savings account, spending part of it on my travel to and from Berlin, and another part on a blue evil eye for my crush's charm bracelet, a charm I never found the courage to give to her. I didn't beat myself up about this. Bigger things were going to happen to me than getting a Strokes tattoo behind the bleachers from the hot girl from my hometown. I would be a different person in 5 weeks. I just knew it. I would be a person fluent, a person who had been to Europe. I left on the Ides of June. My Lufthansa flight attendants didn't humor my lilting German and responded in English to my request for ginger ale. When I arrived on the program's campus, the reverse became true, and English was now contraband. I made a best friend during the program, the kind other kids made when they went to camp, someone they could love unconditionally, maybe be a little homoerotic with, and if they were lucky, never ever see again. Adelaide was Australian, and her German had a southern drawl that made her words take on a mystic quality, like she was out of a fairy tale or grew up in an amusement park. She was the first person I told my secret to, first in German and then in black market English, because I needed her to understand. She accepted my secret, what it meant to me, and moved on. Parents are bizarre, she dismissed, until I stopped bringing it up. We decided our last night in Berlin should be about taking risks. I hoped this meant we would kiss. The drinking age in Berlin was 16, but most clubs wouldn't let in anyone under 18 because of some rule that either said you couldn't drink hard liquor or be in there after midnight. I wasn't sure which. Probably it was both. But Adelaide and I heard through the grapevine that there was a club in Kreuzberg that let you in and let you stay so long as you arrived before 10. That evening, we bought black dresses to make ourselves look older, which made us look younger, and spent over an hour walking around Kreuzberg trying to find this club. We arrived with 15 minutes to spare. Inside it was a brave new world, and we drained the last of our euros on ecstasy and pilsners. The club reportedly had a waterfall, which we tried in vain to find, and gave up to sit around a fire pit with a group of Greek Erasmus students. I'm Greek too, I said, giving my mother's maiden name as my own. Yamas, one of them cheersed, while another drunkenly cried the traditional Easter greeting, Alithostenisti. I replied on cue. Early the next morning, before sunrise, Adelaide and I stumbled into my dorm, spilling 4 a.m. falafel in the entryway. We lay beside each other in my bed, and even in my Molly come-down, I wondered if we would kiss. Instead, she asked me why I went out of my way to lie to those clubbers about something they had never inquired. I panicked and mumbled something incoherent. We laughed, the sun rose, we didn't kiss. Tearful goodbyes were exchanged, false promises to keep in touch, and then the relief of being alone to process the liminal, or not. We ran into each other in the bathroom at Brandenburg and discovered we had booked the same flights home. First was a 1-hour flight to Frankfurt, followed by a 12-hour flight to LAX, where my parents would pick me up, but where Adelaide would dawdle during a 4-hour layover, just to continue again, taking a 17-hour flight to Sydney. We made idle small talk until the second flight, when she took a melatonin and slept the entire route. I sat a few rows behind her, both of us with aisle seats. My focus shifted between the chronological installments of Mission Impossible and other passengers in Adelaide's row as they ambled over her to get to the bathroom. I replayed the night in my head. The dancing, the drugs, the laughing, the not kissing, the Greeks. I knew, had the clubbers been Egyptian, I wouldn't have said a word. Thank you. And now, our wonderful finale, the beautiful, the industrious, the debut, Alexa Brami.
Oh my gosh, that was so special. Thank you, Bex. Thank you, Molly, for organizing this and everyone who read. This is so fun. I feel really honored to be with y'all. I'm going to be reading from my novel, Good News, which comes out in May. I hope you all pre-order it from Books Are Magic when the time comes. This excerpt is when our main character, Maggie, who is an artist, is going to a party at her brother's house. Her brother is dating this sort of avant-garde performance artist, and she eclipses Maggie in pretty much every way, who is also an artist, and she feels pretty insecure about that. She's going to this party with her boyfriend, Rob, industrious himself, who eventually has to leave the party for work. And this is like a little bit of a bifurcated entry. I'll guide you through it. We're gonna get there. All right. John had mentioned this in the weeks leading up to their party, that the evening would be meant to celebrate the inevitable success of the artist's show, of course, but also that it would coincide with the unveiling of her sculpture that had been commissioned by their apartment building. The commission had been issued over a year ago, and Maggie gasped at the sum she'd been offered for her services. They paid her $300,000 for a sculpture that Maggie couldn't believe didn't do anything, like spin or light up. Let's get closer to it, Rob said. About the size of a vintage Italian coupe, a round black cloud was covered in lacquered spheres of varying sizes. The largest was as big as a bowling ball, and the smallest could be mistaken for caviar. It seemed to hover above the ground because the metal posts it rested on were painted black, so at night they'd disappear. It sparkled in the light of the street lamps and somehow reminded Maggie of a brain. Rob reached out to touch it. It's hard, he said. All right, so they go to this party. Rob has to go to work, and Maggie's alone in the crowd, and she's pretty miserable. John caught Maggie's glance and waved her over to a group of grave-looking white women and their slightly baboonish husbands, all with the kind of papery skin that Maggie's mother constantly told her to be grateful she didn't have. Maggie appeared by John's side, and he hung an arm around her shoulders. This is my sister Maggie. She's also an artist. And Maggie smiled and bowed her head. It was kind of John to introduce her like this, as an artist in her own right. The group received her with barely a murmur, and Maggie immediately wished John had never called her over. Sister, one of the women said, somehow incredulous. I would have never guessed. What do you mean? Maggie asked. Well, you two hardly look alike. Maggie searched John's face for traces of herself. She saw her thick eyebrows over his light eyes, honey-colored like their father's and Sophia's. They were the pale ones, while olive undertones colored Maggie and her mother beigeish, with dark brown eyes. She observed John's nose, the nose they all had, even their father, the one from a region far, far north. It was delicate and narrow as you traveled down to the tip where the slope fell harshly. John had their father's thin and serious mouth, sure. Maggie's was more full, like her mother's, feminine. But he looked like her John, her brother. They looked like they belonged to each other because, of course they did. Maggie's Turkish genes are strong, John said, smiling. Mine are all recessive. These people found humor in this, and Maggie was overcome with the feeling that she should defend John. Look at this hair! Coarse and dark and strong enough that it would outlast all of theirs, even the women's. Look at this mouth. Look at this mouth and tell her this wasn't Ataturk's mouth. Turkish, exclaimed the same woman who had doubted their affiliation. A few of the surrounding guests sparked along with her. They wanted to know where was best to vacation and which cities were safe for tourists. If any, another woman added with a horrified flare. They directed all their questions to Maggie, even though John was the one who had actually been born there. Maggie wiped the sweat forming on her upper lip and dried her hand on the leg of her overalls. The relentless heat was beginning to make her feel faint. Excuse me, she said, retreating after having given polite answers to their questions about the Middle East. No one seemed to mind her departure. They resumed chatting, all livelier and more animated than when she had arrived. Setting her drink on the counter, Maggie made her way to escape for a second of fresh air. She could feel John's eyes on her as she moved toward the door and caught his glance before exiting. Like a cartoon, he jerked his head back and mimicked getting shot. Then he mouthed to her. Leaving? He said without saying. Call, she mouthed in return and held up her fingers to her ear to resemble a phone. John gave a quick nod, and Maggie ducked out of the apartment, otherwise unnoticed. The shock of cold air nearly choked Maggie as she wound her way toward the brain. Earlier in the evening, she overheard the artist explaining a complicated root system beneath the metal posts. She had apparently designed an entire network of poles beneath the soil that served as a mirror image to the brain. She had welded each rod individually, modeling them after an in-depth study of ginkgo roots. The structure beneath the brain was simultaneously delicate and indestructible. Maggie reached out to touch it, and just as Rob had said, it was hard. It was freezing cold, and it was undeniably marvelous. Infuriating, the artist's understanding of the world, how finely she articulated the line between human and inhuman, science and nature, how she could invoke the real through the false. It became obvious to Maggie, suddenly, that her own work was drowning by her own hand, too fiercely dedicated to the real. That's what plagued her painting. Because of her devotion to the women she was painting, making them all as real as possible, nobody could see the heights of their suffering. They just looked like women. Maggie's phone buzzed in her pocket with messages from Rob. I'm so sorry, Mags. Then another. It's gonna be a while. And another. I'm trying to hurry. And what was there for her to say, really? Take your time, she typed, and then erased. She thought about apologizing for snapping at him in the car, but then felt confused about why she should have to. She typed, I'm not sure the artist knows the difference between Nigeria and Sudan, she could tell him. Or apparently I have naturally strong arms, which is something another guest had told her. She tucked her phone into her pocket without responding. Instead, Maggie stared at the brain, willing it to tell her something. Party's that bad, huh? And the voice was unmistakable. The low, confident drawl that never asked a question it didn't already know the answer to. Maggie turned her head and saw Rakib's long strides drawing himself toward her. You're all alone out here, kid, he said. Maggie's body moved in all the familiar ways it did around Rakib, soft and subdued, utterly succumbed to his spell. Well, not anymore. Thank you.
Everyone, please keep it going for tonight's readers. Esther, Michaela, Beth, Alexa. Oh, yeah. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. It is such an honor and a pleasure to work and booksell and write alongside all of you. Bex's book, Rot Party, is available for purchase up at the front, so please get a copy of that if you haven't already, or get a second or a third. They're really small and really great. That's all we have tonight. Please help yourself to snacks and drinks on your way out, and have a great rest of your night. Let's give it up once more. Thank you all.